So since we learned that inline styles are bad, let's find a better alternative. I removed the inline style, and the first alternative I want to show you uses the head section. There you can add a special style tag. So it's a normal HTML tag with the name style. And between the opening and closing selector, you can now write so-called CSS rules. Now, a CSS rule in the end includes the same property value assignment we used on the section. It just adds one extra thing, because if you just write background and then your color here, like FF1B68, of course, CSS would have no chance of knowing what you want to style with that color. You don't attach it directly to the element. So what you need to add is a so-called selector. A selector simply is an additional piece of information that tells CSS to which element in your DOM, so inside of your body, and the body is also treated as an element, by the way, to which element you want to assign this declaration. So where you want to change the background in our case. You add a selector by simply typing the tag name without the lower than and greater than signs. So just section in our case. Then you add opening and closing curly braces to now mark the part where you will set up the rules or the declarations for that given selector. Because you can, of course, add multiple selectors for different elements on your page. So in our case, I would grab that background code and put it inside of these curly braces. And now I'm telling CSS, and CSS executes automatically. It's run by the browser, so to say. I tell it that it should look for all section elements on the page. We only have one, but it would actually use all. And apply this style to all found instances, so to all sections on the page. So if I now save this and I reload the page, we don't actually see a difference, which makes sense because we still styled this element, but now no longer via inline styles, but by directly adding a style in our template or in our head section like this. Now, as I mentioned, this applies to all sections. So if you add a second section, and we'll need one in our project later, if you add a second section here, and let's say in this section we have another h1 tag where we say choose your plan, because later this will be the part where users can select their hosting plan. If we do this and we save the file and we reload, you see both sections actually have that style. You also see there is some white space between them and around them. I will come back to why that is the case later. But now you can already see that selector doing work. You write the rule once and you select all sections. That's another advantage compared to inline styles, where you would have to add this declaration to each section separately. And if you ever changed the color, you would have to change it in all these section styles. So that is the better way for many reasons. Now there is one other way of including styles though, and that is using an external style sheet. So let's do that now. For that, I'll add a new file to the project. You can create it in your Windows Explorer or Apple Mac Finder, of course, or directly in your IDE, as I do. And in that new file, we will store the CSS code. Hence, the file should end with .css, because it contains CSS code. The name is up to you. I will name it main because it refers to the main page of our web application, of our web page, but you can pick any name you want. Now, in that file, you write your CSS rules. Remember, a rule is this part, which is composed of a selector, a property, and a value. So you grab that rule, and then you put it into that CSS file. Without the style tags, that's important. We're not in an HTML file, so we don't need style tags. With that added, we can remove the style tags from the index.html file. And now we can save both files, so the changed index.html file and the new main.css file. If we then go back to the running page and we reload it, you see the styles are gone. And do you have an idea why this is happening? It of course happens because in our index.html file, we never specify that we want to use or include this main.css file. And how would our browser know? It doesn't automatically scan our file system and include every file it finds. So we have to explicitly tell it to use the main.css file. And we do so by adding a link element. so normal link element as we use it for the fav icon, with rel set to style sheet to inform it that we're including a style sheet here. And then the hyperreference, added with the href attribute, should point to that file. If that file would live in a subfolder, then you would add subfolder/filename, but since it's in the same folder here, we just put the file name, so main.css. If we now save that index.html file and we reload, the styles are back, because now we're including the styles through our file here. And with that, you learned the third way of including CSS. This actually is the recommended way, because by using an external style sheet, you can have a clear separation of your HTML and your CSS code, which is especially useful as your CSS code grows and would bloat your head section at some point. And additionally, if you use the same style sheet in multiple pages, let's say, then your browser can cache the style sheet and doesn't need to re-download it for every new page. Whereas if you include your styles in the head section, you increase the file size of your HTML file, and the browser needs to re-download it, since it's part of the HTML page, for every new page, which can be slower. That is why in this course, we will use an external style sheet, even if we only have one rule, as in this case.